Most teams find out they have an LLM cost problem the same way: they open the billing dashboard at the end of the month and feel sick. One endpoint, one model, 10 times what they budgeted, and no idea which call caused it. That's not a hypothetical. That's the pattern showing up across dozens of teams shipping LLM-powered products right now. And the frustrating part? The data to catch it early was always there. Nobody was collecting it. Costly is an open-source SDK that wraps your existing LLM calls and gives you real-time cost visibility per call, per model, per user, per feature. You add it once. It tracks everything. Let's get into what it actually does. Section 1. Costly works as a wrapper around your existing API calls. You're already calling OpenAI, Anthropic, or another provider. Costly sits in between. It intercepts that call, counts the tokens going in and coming out, looks up the current pricing for that specific model, and logs the exact cost before your billing cycle ever closes. The integration is minimal. In Python, you import the Costly client, wrap your existing call, and from that point forward every LLM request you make gets tagged with a cost. You're not rewriting anything. You're not changing your logic. You're just adding visibility. What you get out is a structured audit trail. Each entry shows which model was called, how many prompt tokens, how many completion tokens, and the dollar cost calculated from those numbers. You can query that data by feature, by user session, or by time window. Here's the thing that surprised me most about this tool. It's not just about finding expensive calls. It's about finding unexpectedly cheap ones too. Teams often discover that a GPT-4 call they assumed was necessary could be replaced with a smaller model at 1/10 the cost, and the output quality for that specific task was identical. You can't make that trade-off if you don't have the data. Costly also supports multiple providers. So if you're mixing OpenAI and Anthropic in the same product, which a lot of teams are doing for fallback logic or cost optimization, you get a unified view across both. One dashboard, apples-to-apples comparison. The pricing data it uses to calculate costs is maintained in the SDK itself and can be updated. That matters because model pricing changes more often than people realize, and most teams are calculating costs based on numbers they looked up 6 months ago. Section 2. Now let's be honest about what Costly does not do, because this is where a lot of tools oversell. Costly is not a cost optimization engine. It tells you what you're spending. It does not automatically decide to swap your model, throttle your requests, or set hard budget caps that block execution. The decisions stay with you. It's an audit tool, not an autopilot. It also doesn't currently have a built-in alerting system. If you want to get a Slack message when a single call crosses a cost threshold, you're wiring that up yourself using the data Costly exposes. That's not a deal breaker, but it's a real gap if you were expecting a fully managed spend monitoring product. What surprised me was the absence of a hosted dashboard out of the box. Right now, Costly is an SDK that gives you structured data. Visualizing that data, building the chart, the table, the trend line, is on you. For engineers who live in the terminal and prefer raw data, that's fine. For teams who want a shared cost dashboard they can show to a product manager or a founder, there's work to do. And of course, as an open source project, the provider coverage reflects where the maintainers have invested time. If you're using a less common LLM provider, you may need to contribute the pricing config yourself. Section 3. So what could this realistically become? The most natural evolution is budget enforcement. Right now Costly watches. The next step is letting it act, setting a per user or per feature cost ceiling, and having the SDK return a controlled error or trigger a cheaper fallback model when that ceiling is hit. The architecture is already there. It's a policy layer on top of the existing instrumentation. Another plausible direction is cost-aware routing. If Costly knows the cost of every call and you give it 2 or 3 model options for a given task, it could automatically pick the cheapest model that meets a quality threshold you define. That's not speculation, several teams are already building this logic manually using the data Costly provides. There's also a real opportunity in the CI/CD pipeline. Imagine running your test suite and getting a cost report alongside your test results so you catch a prompt refactor that accidentally tripled your token count before it ever ships to production. That kind of shift-left cost awareness doesn't exist in most teams' workflows today, and Costly is positioned to fill that gap. If the project adds a lightweight hosted option, even just a simple dashboard that reads from the SDK's output, it becomes accessible to non-engineering stakeholders. That's when cost visibility stops being a developer concern and becomes a product and business concern, which is honestly where it should live. Section 4. So why does this exist? Because LLM APIs are uniquely dangerous from a cost perspective compared to almost every other cloud service. With a database, your bill scales with storage and queries in ways that are relatively predictable. With an LLM API, a single poorly written prompt that runs in a tight loop can generate a bill that would make your CFO ask uncomfortable questions. And the tooling hasn't caught up. Cloud providers give you aggregate spend data with a 24-hour lag. That's not useful when the damage is done in an hour. Your LLM provider's dashboard shows you totals, not breakdowns by feature or user. You're flying blind at exactly the moment when you need precision. Costly exists because a developer hit this problem, looked for an open source solution, didn't find one that fit, and built it. That's the classic show HN origin story, and it's also why it's genuinely useful. It's solving a real frustration, not a hypothetical one. For teams deploying LLM features to production, this kind of instrumentation should be standard. The fact that it isn't is the whole reason this project got traction. If you're hosting your own backend and you end up deploying Costly alongside your API, DigitalOcean's app platform is worth a look. Straightforward deployment without the overhead, and there's a link in the description. Next episode we're looking at a tool that does something similar but for latency, profiling which part of your LLM pipeline is actually slow. Subscribe so you catch that one when it drops.